Well, I think the automatic recording is started, so I'll do what passes is starting. Welcome to the session on CALI author. We're going to do this a little different than we have in past years. In the past, I have shown you how the CALI software works, and you've all participated and joined me in doing things. And I got this great idea this time. Hold on, I can't talk and enter passcodes. To invite some really interesting guest speakers rather than me to do the bulk of the presentation. So I have 4 fantastic guest speakers. I have Beth Adelman, I have Christine Heaton behind her, I have Scott Burnham, and Jennifer Martin. And I picked these 4 people for really unique reasons because everyone has contributed wonderful things to the CALI library, and they each know something special and different. So I'm really excited that they could all be part of this. For some reason, probably because I was using CALI Author late at night to review a lesson, my software has vanished from my desktop, and CALI Author refuses to install. So I'm going out to the website to find another version of CALI Author.
You just go to the C drive to see the folder. The folder is not there. CALI Author folder.
No, because when I tried, I tried that.
It's not there.
It's not listed under programs.
Yeah.
So I believe that it's become corrupted. It could have been something I ate. I don't know. Sam's in the room, so if it gets really bad, I'm going to turn to him for help. But mainly,
does this really happen, or is this?
No, this authentically happened.
This happened to me at the hotel.
Seriously, then it's the hotel connection.
Yeah, maybe it is.
It's the hotel unsecured internet connection. Stripping our software off.
Disappeared.
Right. Right. I've never had that happen anywhere. But that would be the one thing we have in common, Larry.
Yeah.
We both use the hotel. And we like sunshine and rainbows. So, all right. Well, when this installs, which I thought I was downloading it here. Here we go. Save file. Scott, do you want to start?
Yeah, I need my presentation up, though.
You need your presentation? All right. Give me 19.3, 5 seconds.
When Deb asked me to do this, I thought I would start with sort of a think-through of when I'm asked to create a CALI lesson, how do I plan it? So I'm going to do a more abstract talk on how to think about planning a lesson, and then you'll get more details about using particular question types. And one of the starting points, of course, is some context for your lesson. Where does this fit in with other CALI lessons? And it's under CALI, big surprise.
Oh.
And there you are, writing lessons. And how many of you have ever used the grids on the CALI site? You ever use a grid? This drives me nuts is that when you go to the CALI site and it asks you what lesson you're interested in, they're all alphabetical. Well, this is a stupid way to find a topic, is alphabetical. If you go to the grids, you'll find like and they're not grids for all subjects, but you'll find what it looks like an outline of the topic, and then you have the CALI lessons as they appear in the outline form. So in contracts, for example, you have offer, acceptance, and consideration topics and the lessons that are available. So this is the first question, and as I would say, we'll check the grid to see, is there anything that's prerequisite to the lesson you're thinking about? Should your lesson refer to other CALI lessons? And then you might also think about the target audience. Are you introducing students through this lesson, or are you using it to review material that they've already studied? And frankly, for me, as I'm going to explain in a moment, it doesn't make much difference whether it's an introduction or for experienced students, and I'll explain why it doesn't make much difference in a second. So the particular topic that Deb asked me to write a lesson on, because this would fill in our grid to see that all contract topics are covered, is installment contracts. So I'm thinking, well, what material do I want the students to be familiar with in installment contracts? So I'll think of some background material like White and Summers' chapter on installment contracts. I will probably end up using little of that in the lesson. Other writers, I won't mention any names, put in big chunks of this sort of secondary source material in their lesson. But you can kind of pick and choose that. And then it's going to wrap around a statute and the official comments for the statute. So that I'm going to be heavily relying on. And if we were not a statutory area, I'd probably use something like a restatement section that would capture the material. So then I think in terms of outcomes, I'm way ahead of the game here. What do I want students to be able to do when they've completed this lesson? And things there like I want them to be able to identify an installment contract, and I want them to distinguish between breach of one installment and breach of the whole. And then this is why it's important to have somebody who knows the area to write the lesson, because then you get a sense of what are the problem areas for the students, and I want to identify those and work through those. And this is a matter of personal taste, but I usually write out my lesson in word processing format and then cut and paste it into CALI Author initially rather than start writing in CALI Author. Okay, so then I'm obviously going to start with an introduction, a little overview of what's going to be covered, and again, you'll see these pages later on. And then again, I'm going to put the topic in context. Is this and here, installment contracts is an exception to the general rule. It's a particular type of contract. So we're going to start with the general rule about, with a question that involves, well, what's the general rule when you agree to deliver goods? Can you deliver them in portions, or do you have to deliver them all at once? And so something like this might be a simple yes, no button question, or a multiple choice question. And it seems to me there's three general pedagogical approaches you can use when you write these questions. One is to teach them the material, maybe through text, and then test them on what you've taught them. The second is to test them on it, that is, not give them the background, but ask them the question, and then use the answer to the question to teach them the material. And then there's the hybrid approach, which is to use the second approach just without any background, hit them with the question, but let them consult the material in order to formulate their answer to the question. So, for example, I would have that earlier multiple choice question, but then at the end of the question, it would say, feel free to consult UCC 2307 before you respond, and it'd be a hyperlink to 2307. So that way, in answering the question, they get the pop-up of 2307. That has the answer in it. They can read that and use that to formulate their answer. So it doesn't really matter to me then whether they're experts in the area or new students. If they're an expert, they probably don't need to look at the 2307 pop-up. If they're new to it, they probably do need to look to it. And one of our goals here is to get students to read the statute. So in answering this question, I'm going to try to reinforce what the statute says. So if they answer it correctly, the response might say, good, you understand that 2307 says blah, blah, blah. If they answer incorrectly, I might have a branch to a new question that will say something like, read 2307 and try again, or consider this and try again. And then even if they answer correctly, I might still want to know, well, did you answer correctly for the right reason? So even if there's a correct answer, I might branch out and say, well, is it because of this, is it because of that, or because of the other? So they can't just blindly choose between answers. They have to know why they're choosing a particular answer. And then I probably follow up, since this is now testing the main point, I might follow up with another question about an exception to the rule. And so now I'm going to give them I've talked about the basic rule, And I'm talking about installment contracts as an exception to the rule. So now I'm going to ask them a more theoretical question of, well, can parties change rules when they draft contracts? And this is going to get us into Article 1 of the UCC on the ability to change rules. And then if I just want to tell them something, I'll use a text page. So here I'm going to have a text page and just say, okay, we're dealing with installment contracts. This is the subject of 2612. Here's 2612, and I'll just lay it out. But then I'll also have it as a pop-up so that they can look at it during different parts of the lesson. So now I'm going to have questions that are going to work through the various sections of the statute. For example, subsection 1 is just a definition of installment contract. So I want to know, can you apply that definition? So I'll probably here have a multiple choice set question where it'll say, when the parties do this, is it a multiple choice? Is it an installment contract? If the parties do that, is it a multiple? Is it an installment contract? And have a series of questions like that. And then when I get into subsections 1 and 2, I'm going to focus on this important distinction between two types of breaches, and I'll get into the official comments to help reinforce that. And here I love the text select type question, which is where you have here's a high-tech approach. You have a statute, and the statute goes on, and so you have a question that says, well, what part of the statute authorizes a seller to do that? And they have to select this little bit of the statute, and you'll see that type of question. I love that type of question for close reading of statutes. Are they picking the right words out of the statute? And then I might have a short section, after I work through the statute, I might have a short section on installment contracts outside the UCC. So then after I work through all the substantive material, I might end with an essay type question, just like you'd have on a bar exam, that will recap what we've studied so far. And then I would have a conclusion, and again, it's a standard conclusion where I would tell them what I told them and highlight some of the important points of the lesson. And I might also note other CALI lessons that are relevant to the topic. So that's my framework of the lesson. Next thing I'm going to do is fill it in with particular questions. And I'm done.
Thank you. Jennifer, do you want to go next?
Yeah.
What do you need?
Can I perhaps connect my laptop?
Sure. I'm just going to pull this cord out and see what happens. I'm getting a nod, but I had to screw it in the
Should work theoretically.
Oops. If I'm done, then I have a solution. I had to push it in and screw those little bits. It may have been opposite than what you think it is through. Maybe it was like.
Should I answer any questions while this is being set up?
How long does it take you to do a class?
Oh, it varies a lot. Because I don't
Can't get
know.
it?
Push the alt or something, push it to just project onto the screen. There's a function key in.
Yeah, it never seems to work on it. I've got this.
I would think it would, once I'm ready, I think it would take 10 or 20 hours.
Uh-oh. I think I turned their system off. One moment. Apparently tapping source projector tend to be answered.
I'd say 10 to 20 hours.
For that, but then
You're right.
it's ready for students to use anytime.
Well, sure, but then there's a vetting process that some of you may be on the, what do we call that? The CEB, yeah, that reviews them. And Deb's pretty good at reviewing them for better ways to answer questions, or here you might have a branch or something like that.
Have you ever converted a tutorial that you wrote for a different purpose into something like this?
Yes. Yeah, and
Did you find yourself having to rework very much of it to fit the CALI author kind of framework and the approach you're using here?
yes, but CALI Author is a very flexible tool. I found it pretty much does what I want it to do. I mean, if I want to do something, CALI Author can do it. And if it can't, I ask Sam to fix it. So.
There wasn't.
You kind of stick with the same pattern like from one lesson to the next if you can.
Right, and literally all I did was tap it once.
You know, it depends. Because sometimes,
But you know what?
like here was tracking statutes, so it's a little,
Yes.
the organization might be.
There it is, that.
Sort of form flows.
Okay, should we put mine back on? and look at
I see
lessons?
some signal just a moment ago.
Yeah, definitely seem to wanna,
This is, you know this is broken?
you know, it's been, I have counsel.
And I think that that's that problem. I think that. Right, because your computer is not
But yeah, I was gonna show them the new ones around impossibility, but I'm gonna show them three really quick different approaches, but I could just show them two. I can show them now.
Cool outline you brought up, is that
I should.
Yeah,
How do we do that?
So I think they allow you to upload it to
I can doc, the one that.
somehow.
I think it's
You also think that
and the words that she couldn't. I'm gonna do one here.
weird. Okay, I don't know if there's anything.
If you can't do anything, it's okay.
I saw some signal when you disconnected.
Yeah, there's something going on. This computer is not
One of the
Yeah.
But if we can look at it, look at
We
it.
would love to do that ourselves.
Two of the other ones. I was gonna show them.
Really?
It's interesting, usually if you don't have the signal, it will show you the signal. That's-
Well, it's got massive.
So, I can't do it.
Why not? I don't know, you can use video players, much video,
That was the same. I think that's what this was.
Oh, wow. But you can get on our website. I'll show them.
I can get on the website.
I did. Yeah, one.
where you come in for a certain,
But it doesn't.
All right, so we're trying to.
Yeah, that's my default.
Video notes as well.
Yeah, 'cause it's not, there's something about, it's so definitely this computer.
All right, sorry for the technical issues here. Wait, don't go very far over if you don't mind. I want to make sure that this comes back on when I plug in. Just your presence, I think, will intimidate it more. Yes. All right, thank you. Yeah. All right, unfortunately, Jennifer's computer may be muerte, or it's not working with this system, sorry.
It's not.
The chair could come.
That's okay.
Give it to IT.
Are you already logged in?
Yeah, I'm already logged in. They're in, so. So Jennifer has written a number of lessons in contract law. And the revised plan is to show you the existing lesson and some of the cool features that she put in and how she came up with it.
All right. I was actually going to show you guys 3 different approaches. You know, like Scott said, I put a lot of different, either, you know, some materials from treatises or a lot of pop-ups that have links to materials from our statements or treatises or the like. I am perhaps cynical in that I suspect students don't always read code commentary or statutory material, and if I have any chance to throw it in at them, I like to do so. And so in a traditional format, I'll often start a lesson with some type of description of the law on whatever the topic is. I was going to show you what I'm working on now on excuse doctrine and the doctrine of impossibility. And basically I start with a page that talks about impossibility doctrine, and then it moves on to, it actually has a very short description of one of the problems about impossibility that is in one of the Williston treatises. And then it moves on to a description of a classic case, and then transitions to the problem sets of various and sundry types. And then, like Scott said in mine at the end, I often have an analysis exercise, kind of a mini law school essay that the students can practice with, obviously on just a narrow topic. And so that's what I would call kind of my traditional format. I wanted to show you guys 2 other formats that I think, depending upon what you're going to write about, your material might lend itself to. And this is one of them. This is a lesson I have on the battle of the forms. And particularly the part that I want to show you guys is something I did with statutory material. And basically here, this first starts out with the summary talking about the problem of the battle of the forms, what the code has to say, and then, going on about some of comparisons to the common law. And eventually, it takes you to a page that looks something like this, that has hyperlinks all over the place. And one of the things I think is interesting that makes this different from, say, my common law lesson on excuse doctrine, impossibility, frustration of purpose, impracticability, is that here students have a great difficulty reading statutes and understanding how the little parts of statutes maybe work together. And so something I did with this lesson is basically, this is the statute, and this whole lesson now derives from this page. Whereas a lot of my other lessons kind of go from top to bottom in the way that I described, this one, the students will click on things that are on this page. It will take them to other material, which I'm going to show you, or to other pop-ups, and then it'll go on to questions, and then ultimately bring them back to here. And so it forces them to work through the statute itself. And so if you're thinking about writing something that involves statutory material, I call it the main page with all the different outs and backs is an interesting way to approach it and make sure that the students are forced, whether they like it or not, to look at some of the code. Now, some of this, if we click, for instance, just on reasonable time. Reasonable time is just a pop-up, and I like to use lots of pop-ups, either to have descriptions of things or, as Scott was saying, I like lots of, treatises or statements, and I have all kinds of things hidden in here through these pop-ups. And so this one is really just a standard pop-up about what reasonable time might be. But others of these, for instance, when we go down here, unless acceptance is expressly made conditional assent to the additional or different terms, is going to take us to another page about this is what we call the proviso. And so now this statute then drives you to a book page that has textual explanation, and then from here it's going to then go to problems. And then when you finish the problems, it's going to take us back to that main page. And I want to see if I can get this to go through. We're just going to answer these. I want to get it back to the first page. Come on up. Interestingly enough, I know Scott was talking about this before we go back to the main page. This is one of these questions that's set up with a selection of text. Again, since this is a statutory based lesson, this is one that forces the students to decide, well, which part of the statute is applicable there. Let's see, I think it's asking about the proviso. And then eventually,
That's a nice hint.
yeah, I'm trying to, yeah, it was hint. I'm trying to get us back to the other page. All right, let's see if we can just go. I've written at Deb's suggestion a lot of things in here that make the students answer. Oh, here we go. We're back to the main page. It's going to feed the student back to the main page in terms of the statute after going through those series of problems. And it does force them to actually go through the problems by disabling the next page. So you see how it wouldn't let me just kind of click through to get back. It's a system that's set up to keep the students, force them to go through. But one of the things that Deb and I had kind of corresponded about on this, the other concern is when you use an out and back method on the statute, is that they could just decide they're done. I don't really want to read that statute, or I already read it, I already understand it, which we often know that they have to read it many times to truly understand it. And so it does allow them to click to the next page when they're done, but then takes them to a topical list. And now on this one, there's now a list, and it shows which of the categories they've actually clicked on, or in this case, we've clicked on reasonable time and then the proviso, and to see, to kind of remind them and give them one more chance to perhaps work with the materials some more. I like this format in terms of statutory material, but I have a new lesson that I just finished on the CISG that is about, there's a section about delivery terms, and I actually used this material in the same strategy in a different way. The delivery terms are not statutory. It's based upon the Incoterms that the International Chamber of Commerce sets out. But I have a list of maybe 15 or so of these INCO delivery terms. And I did it kind of along this line where I have a page that has them listed out. And so if you're writing a lesson that has a lot of terminology that you want to be able to quiz the students on, in this new lesson, I'm using kind of this out and back method for part of that lesson where you have the topics and the students can click on them, and when they leave that, it goes to a book page that has a description of what in my case, like X Works is, and then ask them some questions about how to apply that particular terminology, and then feeds back into this page. It's kind of an interesting way, just an interesting twist on when you look at a table of contents for a CALI lesson where you can essentially work through a table of contents like you would with a book. This ends up being kind of an out and back type of method. And I find I like to mix it up depending upon, even in some lessons, in the CISG lesson on performance, I have this list of ICC Incoterms on one page that has kind of a mini out and back. And then there's two other smaller sections on in that lesson that have what I would call more of a traditional format with book pages and then questions following. But these are just meant for some ideas. I'll stop now. And of things that, techniques that you might want to think about if you're using statutory material or something that lends itself to kind of a different type of presentation.
Thank you. Beth, do you want to challenge the technology?
Sure. I don't have that much to display though.
Okay, what can I do? Okay, great. You could close my email notification. Scott has shared the presentation, as we all saw. So I'll post that up.
Oh, that's fine.
That's very kind of him.
I'll keep that up in case I want to show something. I just have a brief little discussion about the value of using a single hypothetical throughout a lesson. The first lesson, I've co-authored 4 lessons, and in this lesson I worked with 3 other co-authors, so we were a big, happy group. And 3 of the 4 of us are instructors of legal research, and we're always trying to find hypotheticals in our legal research courses that will grab students, like, you know, the boundary territory issues with the trees hanging over and all that, and then inevitably have students coming up to you after class saying, I have that exact issue, this is great. And, you know, then you have the ones where, you know, you talk about whether students can discharge their student loans in bankruptcy and they listen intently. And so you have, you know, 4 of us in the room, and we're talking about how to structure this lesson, and we go through a lot of the same, you know, thought processes that Scott brought out. And we were trying to find a good hypothetical that would run through the lesson, hoping that maybe there could be a story that would grab students. And it's difficult because for a state lesson with the primary sources, you know, you're going through the cases, the statute, the regs, and, you know, some secondary sources and other stuff. And it's really hard to often find, you know, each of those kind of sources that fit well within your scenario. So it really did take a lot of time, I have to admit, but it can be very effective. So I guess to step back and say, you know, I was at Georgia State for a couple of years and then left, and since then I've been told, you know, there were students that actually thought it was a real story. I've also been told there's somebody, the main character in the story is Patrick Justice, and Patrick was named after one of the author's son, and Justice was just a name we thought was great for a legal research lesson. And there was, in fact, a Patrick Justice in one of the legal research courses there, so he was just thought that was great. So what we would do is, I mean, it was a brainstorming session, multiple ones I would say, but we first started out trying to think of things that were stereotypically Georgia, like, you know, sweet tea and pecans, and, you know, made this whole list of, you know, heat and humidity and, you know, cockroaches and everything you can think of. Don't laugh, it's in the lesson, I'll show you. But anyway, and we actually tried to run searches for cases and statutes, particularly if you could find a good case, that was a really good way to start. And we did, in fact, end up finding one that, you know, included a number of the stereotypes. And the lesson, the Georgia Legal Research lesson, included, you know, the North Georgia mountains. There's bear, you know, a bear character in the lesson. There's a character named Savannah, which is obviously a character who's named after a city in Georgia. Stuckey's restaurant, if anybody's ever driven through the South, you know what I'm talking about. Cockroaches, sweet tea, you know, all these things are sort of mentioned. And for people, obviously, going to law school in Georgia, you know that, you know, these things are, you know, symbols that you're aware of. So I'm just going to tell you. I do want to show you, and I will say, if you don't work in a group, if you're a single author, you know, if you want to brainstorm, you could just get a bottle of wine and, you know, brainstorm yourself with a bottle of wine. So that would work just as well. So I don't remember. Let's
Now I find the secrets of authoring.
We had some nice images in here, but the cockroach was really good drawn by
Eric Gurnsky, yeah. He also did Patrick. That was a picture of Patrick sitting at his computer, working in the library, I think. There's one of the bear.
Yeah, the bear
that drives. Right.
Well, I can't bring it up quickly, but at any rate, the story ended up being about a newly minted law student, Patrick Justice, who had some trials and tribulations, and inevitably that took him through the course of having to do some research at a law library in Georgia, in the North Georgia mountains.
You want the cockroach? What do you want?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly where it is. I think I can, well, actually, in the introduction, there's a nice picture of the bear. Oops, there it is. So there's where Patrick Justice has his first little incident that leads him, down the path of this fantastic little story. So, and it has a little love story in it. So, and anyway, so I guess the bottom line is that if you have, a theme running throughout, I think it really does grab the students. I think it's one of the better lessons that I've been involved with, and it's, has a lot to do with the story, as the story sort of makes it an effective grab you tool. I have offered other lessons where I've used themes, but not a theme throughout. It really does take a lot of time to find something that just fits perfectly with finding that has a related regulation and so on. So there you have it. Anybody have any questions? So, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Beth. Chris, I put your handouts on the back corner. Do you want me to pass them out, or?
Yeah, I made up a bunch of handouts, learned about killing trees, but it was just easier, so. Do you have
No, I don't think I have that. Hold on a second, let me see if I can find a copy of it. Well, here's Stucky's.
Yeah, that was a postcard we got off of eBay.
Yeah. Patrick at work. Here we go. Here's our. Let me. Well, here's the cockroach. Our freelance artist has a background drawing for kids' TV shows, and I have an unbelievable phobia about cockroaches. So his instruction was to not make it look creepy. So it looks kind of like something that you find on Nickelodeon or the Disney Channel.
Okay.
All right.
I'm Christine, I'm here to talk to you a little bit about adding like video screencasts into CALI Author. Sometimes you want to do searches and stuff and you want to do some screen capturing. So I put together a handout of the process that we used in the Georgia Secondary Sources lesson. I worked with several authors and helped them put stuff in CALI Author. So hopefully.
Yes, the number.
No, the article does.
You got more.
We'll post these up to the session website.
Okay.
So if you don't have it, my apologies, we just took a ballpark of how many people Is this an extra?
This is, anybody has the Camtasia thing?
Yeah, there are.
Mine's
expanding
Yeah. But there's another,
There's actually two versions. So let me explain these handouts first. I should have done it probably a lot easier. First, there are several products you can use to do screen capturing. The two that I looked at were Camtasia and Captivate. I used Captivate for what Nancy, Ron, and Terrence wanted me to do for their lesson. With using Captivate, there were some limitations as much as I love that product. Camtasia is a lot easier, and I'll explain just briefly about that. So I put instructions on how to just do a simple screencast with both. There's more you can do, but I wanted to provide both handouts, but I'm going to suggest you go with Camtasia, and I'll explain that in a little bit. And I also have the process diagram. So. Sorry, this looks a little.
Do you have the finished version of what you did, Chris, on yours, on your computer?
No, but I bet we could bring it up.
We can pull it up on mine then.
The first thing with doing this, if you look at the handout, the one that's in color, is you want to storyboard out what you want to capture first. It's really, if you go, and some people are really good with winging it and ad-libbing it. I am not. I need to know exactly what I'm mapping out and what I'm going to do. It actually makes it go faster, then I don't have so many redos and, correcting mistakes. So if you can use just open Word, whatever word processing software, make a table and put just down, okay, here's the first screen we're going to capture. The action on the screen that needs to happen is we're on Wilson Web, and someone's going to type in the word Georgia and torts, and then you're going to get the search results from there. So you just map that out, and so it's like a blueprint, so when you get ready to start to capture in the software, you have something to follow that goes a lot faster. And also it helps you visualize, as you're writing everything down of what you want to do, it helps you pare it down, so you're only putting in the things that are needed for the task. So you're not putting a lot of extra steps in there that you don't need. And it's a good idea to keep your screencast smaller in duration. Just think about your end user. Smaller nuggets are always better. They can go back and play them again and so forth. The next step after you get your storyboard done is to actually go into the software and capture it. Now some folks, again, I hate to say this, I just prefer to capture first and then record the audio. Like going through and making the captures, following the actions and everything, and then trying to read along with the script. I would make mistakes and you have to start over. So what I did was I just captured first, and then I went back and recorded the audio. So again, capture only what you need in order to demonstrate the task. When you're capturing, just think about standard video sizes. I just put down on this 640 by 480 pixels for your window size. That's a nice size that shows up in CALI Author on the screen. And then go slowly when you're capturing, and it makes it much easier when you're playing it back to record the audio. So after you've captured everything, you're going to record the audio. You have two options. For example, in Camtasia or in Captivate, but I'm going to stick with the Camtasia route. In Camtasia, you can hook up a microphone to the computer and play your video back and record the audio along with your script for each action. It also allows you to import audio. So for example, if the machine that you're using that has Camtasia on it is in an office like mine where it sounds like the Hartfield International Airport because the HVAC system is so loud in the office, you may want to take an MP3 recorder and read your script, find a nice quiet location to do it that doesn't have a lot of ambient noise in the background, and just go slowly and record your audio. Then you can very simply import it back into your Camtasia file when you're recording.
Camtasia also sometimes includes, depending on the version you're using, some good cleaning things. So if you're using a laptop and you don't have an MP3 file, you could go somewhere in a quiet room and you might get some of the whine noise from the background on the laptop, but it can actually do some of that cleaning up for you.
And so that's one thing about finding a quiet place to record. Again, the background noise, you may not realize it when you're recording, but when you play it back, you'll be like, yeah, my users are going to hear this.
They have very inexpensive headsets with noise canceling microphones on them that will screen out almost everything also.
After you get the audio imported into Camtasia, which you'll see in the instructions, you can adjust and slide the position around and kind of play with it. And giving you specifics on how to edit the audio in Camtasia is a little bit beyond the scope of what I'm going to talk about today, but they have really good help materials that will talk you through how to do that in Camtasia or in Captivate.
Then you're going to want to publish a movie after you get everything set up in your project file. And so you're going to want to choose one of the audio file types that are available in CALI Author. You can do an API, you can do a SWF file or FLV. You can publish straight out to SWF in Camtasia and in Captivate, so you may want to do that. If you publish it out with API, CALI Author will convert it into a SWF file when it does this. It's hard for me to describe it, but basically it converts it. So then you want to add the movie into your CALI lesson after you have the file published out, and you just need to make sure it's in the same folder with your lesson book. And so drop it in the same folder in the same location. And then you'll open the screen that you want to put the video file in, and so you click the question tab and then video, and then you can browse and find the file and put the video in it. So now that we're at the point where we're talking about adding movie to CALI lesson, this is where I want to explain a little bit about the difference between Camtasia and Captivate. And when I use Captivate, again, it could be just that there's someone who has more experience with Captivate than me, but I try very hard different ways to publish out the file without embedded playback controls. Captivate likes to, you can either do them separately or it'll put it on top of the actual video file so you can control it. Well, CALI Author automatically has a playback control built into it. So if you put a video that has controls already on it and CALI Author has controls on it, it can be problematic. So if you have a video file that has those playback controls and you can't get them out, just let Deb know, and they'll provide you, CALI will provide you a special file that you can add in, and they'll make sure that it gets rid of the controls or disables those controls in the video. Now, with Camtasia, on publishing, you'll see in the document that I handed out, it's very, very easy. There's actually a setting that says publish with no controls, and so you hit publish, and boom, it's done. You drop it in, and it works really well. So again, I don't want to just say that you should use a particular product, but I found that working with Camtasia and CALI Author was much simpler and easier to use. So I guess what we can do is bring up the lesson, but I guess can you use your laptop for that?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the nifty things is Chris was involved in the Georgia State Secondary Legal Resource Material. And it was also written by you and your team at Georgia State. And they took the hypothetical that the primary authors had written, and they built on it. So you've got Patrick reoccurring as a character over on this side. And Patrick is aged, and so it's sort of the sequel, if you will. It's Die Harder Part 2 sort of thing. Let me put the sound out, so we need that as soon as the sound, which is going to have to come around the front here somewhere. It's one of those two there. You need a light, Chris? You gotta need your light. You can see the buttons. Now you can really see the buttons. Oh, I may have muted the sound on my laptop.
Okay.
I think I, oh, great.
For where specifically it was. Sorry, I'm just trying to navigate. I can't remember off the top of my head, and it's just being nervous, so.
All right, we got to see a lot of images, a lot of great text, question types, pop-ups.
We're not looking.
Oh, wait, it's in here.
Oops.
In the find box, he enters the search term toys in Georgia, and then press start to begin the search.
So that's pretty much it. It was just small nuggets of how to do something and demonstrate a simple task of doing a search. So if you want to include the screencast in, I suggest, again, write out what you're going to capture first, and then you want to do your capturing, then record the audio, and then publish it out, and then put it in CALI Author and test it. So, does anybody have any questions?
There are a number of free things. Captivate and Camtasia are both not free. Camtasia, I've used both as well, and I really like Camtasia. The free things are usually limited in time. Some of them, it's hard to download the file if you want to control it, and they're usually not as good for editing. All of the things that you recommended, like doing the audio separately, are a lot easier when you have a full editing suite. But Jing and Snagit are two things that are also produced by TechSmith, who produce Captivate. They're both pretty nice user interfaces, and if you just want to try it out, you can experiment with what the process is like using those without having to buy a big software program.
And my email is cdheaton@gsu.edu. I'm on the Georgia State Law site in the technology department, pretty easy to find. Please feel free to shoot me an email if you have a question. I'll try to help you as best as I can and talk you through the process. But it's fairly simple. You just have to get in there and try it. Not be afraid to go in there and try something new, and get with someone who's already done the task that you're doing to help you, so you can get started. And once you get comfortable with it, then you'll be really fine with it.
Thank you. Well, this presentation started a couple months ago with a slightly different idea. We'd have everyone do 5 minutes. That was my idea, 5 minutes. And then we were all going to open up our laptops and group write a lesson. And then as I talked to, pardon?
5 minutes, Kate.
Right, exactly. And then as I started talking with all 4 of my speakers over the last couple of weeks, I realized that 5 minutes was really not going to work. Everyone needed more time, which is probably good because it's better to hear from these 4 fabulous authors today than to listen to me walk you through the software, because actually you can go home and fire up your internet, and on Blip TV, if you go to cali.org and you find our resources, we've got links to Blip TV where I'm doing these fascinating webinars on CALI Author software. So you can have 90 minutes of my voice clicking you through screens. My mom loves it. It's really great, and I would invite you then to email with any specific questions. I'm happy to do an online training session, any questions that you have about CALI Author. And we do, as you can see, have a very deep pool of fabulous authors who are always willing to talk with other people. I can't tell you the number of times I've called one author and said, another author's having problems conceptualizing this, can you chat with them? And 2 strangers will just meet on the phone and chat through the legal issues and find a way to approach the problem. So I do have a lot of resources at my fingertips, although installing our software today, something's happened to my laptop, I fear. So are there any general questions? Otherwise, I'm going to turn you loose to the snack time. Scott?
I started with the grid. Can you show how to find the grid, because it's not easily found?
Sure. You go to lessons, and you go by topic grid, and then you wait for the page to load. Okay, there we go. And so each of these subject areas listed, I don't know if you can see this, I'll go to contracts in honor of Jennifer and Scott. And this list, it's an outline format, and the brown repetition of the lesson title in this case means we've got a lesson on that topic. So Jennifer and Scott have been working for a number of years in one of our authoring pods, which means they write independently, but they talk to each other, and the 3 of us every so often meet to discuss where the gaps are in the coverage. And they pretty much filled contracts law. We're up to, I think, 75 or 76 lessons, something like that. And if you figure each one is a short hour, we've got a lot of seat time in contract law. Bargain theory here also covers gift promises, past consideration, things like that. So it's a pretty deep area. We've also got podcasts. This is Scott talking about the plural evidence rule, so students have access to a lot of things. Another way you can access materials is through our casebook correlation tables. We've got the lessons and we link them into a lot of the key casebooks that are out there. You can see gaps then, but at least if students are on page 1 to 100 or 1 to 50, we try to make it as narrow as we can. In a casebook, there's a suggested lesson that they work with, or sometimes a couple. Questions? Yes?
I actually was looking at another subject, but I think it's relevant to any of them. Obviously, the brown ones are where you have a lesson.
Right.
But if it's a subtopic of, like, for example, see, it doesn't show as well here, but
where are you?
I was looking, for example, at the legal research and writing grid.
Right.
So if you look at statutes or something.
Right. The general
no, I was
rule.
thinking, is this a legal research and writing? Okay.
Right. The check mark means I've worked that lesson.
Okay. So all those are subtopics of the, see.
Right, so
in the
where
other
does
view,
law
it
come
doesn't show
from?
as well.
Pardon?
In the other view, the one that looked like what we were looking at
Yeah.
before, it wasn't clear to me if there were, like in this case, the forms of federal statutory publication included all of those subtopics.
Right, that's our goal. And the goal here, like if we're looking at 2.2 right here at the bottom of the screen, the goal is that the forms of publications, that heading is covered by the lesson, forms of federal statutory publication, that particular lesson. And this particular lesson covers the 6 items listed beneath it.
So those are all
right. Some of the different grids, I think what we're trying to avoid is, gee, you lack uniformity in your presentation of grids. That's the sentence we're trying to avoid. And some of the grids look a little different than others just based on how it's going to best serve the authoring community and the users.
I was just trying to figure out how to know what needs to be filled in.
Right.
If I was interested in possibly writing something.
Right, exactly. I also have a list on the Legal Research Community Authoring Project Advisory Panel page that lists lessons in progress, which you'd want to know about for legal research.
Thanks.
Other questions? Well, I want to thank very much my panel, Jennifer Martin, Scott Burnham, Beth Adelman, and Chris Heaton. Thank you all very much for your presentation.
No, the CALI lesson. And it's in a freshman.
Yeah.
Can it be taken out?
Yeah, I think so. Elmer's got a file on their website somewhere.
The exercise there, while you are in the class, finish that.
I don't know how ask because he's looking at Blackboard. And I know Yes. Okay. Thanks for the close. Yeah. Oh, that's just how I was saying. Right.
Where you find an email from the, say, here's how it's considered.
And I'll look that up this summer. Maybe I'm going to
Yeah, but I just said, use your computer. I'm gonna talk now.
It's on my hand now because I'm in New York for the rest of the summer.
Oh, you are?
I think that's great. And then, I just thought it was fun.
That, you know, I wish that
I know, I was gonna say, they got into it, and then the,
unfortunately, using the case
I met him, I think, at the country.
it's on the grid.
That was actually really good.
Contracts.
Yeah.
I don't know the
So you download it.
You don't see it. I just,
That makes sense. Just other great ideas and resources. Not cheap. That is so much better.
student workers.
And this actually, this case book makes life hard because
Well, you know, since we've had it for a while, we failed our 3 years. It's ready.
Right, you should step up.
I will set up. I'll be there.
it's going to be a little more of a puzzle to figure it
Right,
out.
right.
What in the world is one of the two
Indexes.
programs that use government information? They were rewarded. Use of government information. So just out as just pro bono. Two programs.
Right, right.
And then I don't know, makes it they're going back to the surveyors.
Yeah. It can be tricky.
I don't know where they're getting their data from initially because they missed a couple of things. So that's another fantastic is the same things.
Are these yours?
I was trying to research copyright issues. It's not there in English resources. If you go to the government website, it's there. So they were all getting their data from the same place.
Right.
And it just wasn't there.
It was wonderful.
What?
So you're going to the
I'm actually out of town.
Oh, yeah. Were you? You know, as soon as I saw that thing pop up and sitting there, I was like, oh man, somebody's gonna start sending me. Yeah, I had not intended to turn the internet really. So I didn't turn off my notifications. You always tell your faculty and presentations to do. Right. No, thank you for not doing that.
What time's the AA meeting?
I don't know, before I only schedule it one.
There you go.
Were you trying to go?
No, I'm joking.
Thank you.
Oh, the AA meeting. Jeez.
Paying close attention, obviously.
Yeah, I'm headed to, oh, you're,
We have a
yeah, we have a break. 103. Yeah, I'm tracking down the, I'm not tracking down. Are you ready, Flo?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Catching up on some emails, yeah.
I know.
Where are we going?
You're going to 103.
No, but this is not a way out.
Yeah, that is.
It is?
Yeah, it's the second door. See the window? Walk through here. It's an air chamber.
Oh,
Like you're in a spaceship.
I thought it was outside.
No,
That's like that for the bridge.
no.